My name is Charlotte Hayes, 35 years old, living and working in New York, but I was never meant to belong here. I grew up in a small town near Denver, where every dinner ended with lectures, and every dream was boxed in by something called family expectations. Charlotte, you must not ruin this family's only chance. Emily deserves it more than you. That was the sentence I heard when I happened to stand outside the conference room door. My mother, the woman who always smiled sweetly in front of me, was sitting inside with my longtime boyfriend, Dylan Carter, and my sister, Emily. They were discussing their future, a future that should have been mine. I wasn't chosen. I was pushed out of my own engagement like an outsider, and he said nothing. But 7 years later, on a winter night in New York, when I stepped onto the stage in a deep green evening gown, holding the hand of the most powerful man in American finance, the man I called my husband, the Three, think of them froze in the middle of the crowd. If you've ever been betrayed by your own blood, dismissed in the moment you were most vulnerable, leave a comment below. Hit like if you believe the one who was left behind can still become the one leading ahead. Subscribe to this channel to follow my journey from being cast aside to becoming the author of my own destiny. Because this story has only just begun. I was born into a middle-class family in Denver, where everything revolved around saving face. My father worked as an accountant for a construction company, and my mother, Margaret Hayes, always prided herself on being the woman who knew how to steer the family the right way. She often repeated that only one child could carry the Hayes name into high society, and she was certain it wasn't me. I loved art from a young age. While other kids showed off their high scores in math or physics, I poured myself into landscapes and sketches of people. I used to believe that passion was just as valuable as any academic achievement. But every time I held up my drawings, my mother only curled her lips. Beautiful, Charlotte, but do you really think you can live off those paintings? In her eyes, I was always the dreamer, fragile and unrealistic. My sister Emily, on the other hand, was the pride. Emily studied law at a prestigious university, earned scholarships, and won debate competitions. Every time my mother spoke of Emily, her face lit up. That girl has a future. She will take this family far. I tried to convince myself that my mother was just stricter with me, that she loved us both in different ways. But the truth was, she never hid her favoritism. I met Dylan Carter when I was 22, just as he was starting at his father's investment firm. Tall, eloquent, charming, he made me a girl who only knew the colors of paint feel seen. He often attended student art shows, bought my paintings, and wandered the small streets with me. I believed that even if my mother disapproved, Dylan would be my anchor. But that belief started to crumble one summer night. That evening, our family hosted a party to celebrate my father's promotion. The house was crowded, and Dylan was among the guests. I was standing on the porch when I realized he'd been gone a long time after saying he was getting drinks. Curious, I walked down the hall toward the private conference room where my mother often met important guests. The door was slightly ajar, and I heard her voice, low and firm. "Dylan, you can see it yourself. Charlotte is good, but she's not strong enough to walk beside you." I froze. Inside, Dylan sat across from my mother, his face uneasy. She leaned forward, her tone sharp with calculation. "Emily is the future. She has drive, ambition. You two will be a power couple. The Carter family will never regret it. And don't worry, we'll invest in the law firm Emily establishes. This will be the perfect alliance." My heart pounded. I waited for Dylan to object, to defend me, but he only pressed his lips together, his eyes wavering. "Mrs. Hayes, Charlotte and I have been together for years," he said softly. My mother's smile was cold. "Years, yes, but what does she have besides a few paintings no one buys? You need someone who pushes you forward, not someone who holds you back. Think carefully, Dylan. You know I'm right." My whole body shook. Every word was a knife. I waited for Dylan to say she was wrong, that he loved me, that what we had built wasn't meaningless. But he sat in silence, staring into his wine glass, without a word of defense. That moment shattered me. I stepped back, forcing my breath steady so I wouldn't break down right there. The party still buzzed, glasses clinked, guests cheered, while I stood among them with a hollow smile and a bleeding heart. From that day, I noticed every small change. Dylan suddenly mentioned Emily more often, praised her cases, admired her confidence. I listened with bitterness, but told myself he was just being polite. Our dates grew fewer. He was always busy or meeting old friends. Once, when he left his phone at my place, a message lit up the screen. "Lunch tomorrow. Can't wait to hear more of your thoughts." From Emily. My hands went cold. When he returned, I handed him the phone and asked, "Dylan, is there something between you and Emily?" He laughed lightly, brushing it off. "Just friends, Charlotte. She invited me to lunch. How could I say no? It'd be awkward." The answer sounded reasonable enough that I felt like the jealous one, torturing myself. But in his eyes, I saw something that no longer belonged to me. I began to dread family dinners. Emily sat beside Dylan, their conversations lively about lawsuits and strategy, while I stayed silent. My mother's gaze glowed at them as if she'd found her golden pair. Sometimes she glanced at me with open disappointment. One night, after dinner, I knocked on her door, hoping for honesty. "Mom, I love Dylan. We've been together for 3 years. Why would you say those things?" She set her teacup down, her eyes cold. "Charlotte, be realistic. Dylan may love you, but love doesn't feed anyone. Emily deserves to walk beside him. You're the older sister, you should yield." My voice trembled. "Yield? He's not some object to hand over. I have a heart too." She sighed, as if I were a stubborn child. "Your fragile heart will only bring you pain. You were born to dream, not to compete." I choked on my words. In that moment, I understood my mother had never truly seen me. To her, I was nothing more than Emily's shadow, an extra in my own family. I left her room with despair crushing me. From then on, I lived in uncertainty. I loved Dylan, yet every gesture showed his distance. I wanted to believe, but every sign pointed to one truth. I was being replaced, piece by piece. And I didn't know that a very fordrast in might one. The greater storm was waiting ahead, ready to tear apart everything I clung to. That day, I wore the white dress my mother chose, simple yet elegant, hugging my frame enough to give me confidence. They said it would be a small engagement ceremony, only family and close friends. But when I walked into the ballroom of Denver's grandest hotel, I knew this was no family gathering. More than 100 guests, my father's colleagues, Carter family partners dressed in luxury, raising glasses of wine. I searched for Dylan, my heart trembling yet hopeful. Despite all my doubts in recent months, I still wished today would prove our love was real. He stood beside Emily, deep in conversation with a group of young lawyers. When he saw me, he smiled, but the smile was so hollow it chilled me. My mother approached, pulled me close, and whispered, "Just smile, Charlotte. This is a great day for the family." I did as she said, though unease churned inside me. The chandeliers blazed overhead, and the orchestra played a gentle classical piece. The MC announced the ceremony was beginning and invited Dylan to the stage. I straightened my dress, took a deep breath, and braced for the moment he would slip the ring on my finger in front of everyone. But what happened next destroyed everything. Dylan took the microphone, his voice clear and calm. "In front of our family and friends, I want to say something important. Charlotte and I will no longer be engaged." The air felt sucked out of the room. I went numb. My ears rang. All I could hear were whispers spreading everywhere. He continued, his eyes turning toward Emily. "The person I truly want to be with is Emily. From now on, she and I will build our future together." I heard every word, like a blade twisting into my heart. Every guest turned to stare at me. A few soft laughs rose, mixed with mocking murmurs. Oh my God, right in the engagement ceremony. Such a shame. The little sister is the truly clever one. I stood there, my feet as heavy as if nailed to the floor. In my vision, Emily stepped onto the stage, took Dylan's hand, and beamed at the crowd, the image blurring as shock washed over me. My sister, the one I had trusted, the one who shared a childhood bed with me, now lifted her chin and claimed the place that should have been mine. A nearby guest murmured, "Charlotte must not measure up to her sister." The words were quiet, but they froze my blood. I turned to leave when a hand clamped around my arm. My mother. She looked straight at me, her eyes cold and merciless. "Don't make a scene," she whispered, her voice all command. "You should yield the opportunity to someone more capable." I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. "Mom, this is Dylan. This is my love. You know how many years we've been together." "And you think love alone is enough?" She cut in, her tone icy. "Dylan needs someone who can go with him to the Cas. Top. Emily can do that. You cannot. You're the older sister, your responsibility is to yield." "Responsibility? Yield?" I bit my lip, choking back tears. Around us, applause swelled as Dylan and Emily were congratulated as a golden couple. I was pushed aside like an outsider. I yanked my arm free and ran from the ballroom, my heels hammering down the corridor. Tears burst forth, blurring everything. Behind me, I heard my mother call, "Charlotte, come back right now. Don't disgrace the family." But I didn't turn back. I darted into the restroom, shut the door, leaned against the wall, and let the tears fall. The mirror showed a girl with smeared makeup and swollen eyes. That girl wasn't me anymore. There was a knock, then Emily's voice, calm to the point of cold. "Sis, I'm sorry, but this is better for everyone. You'll understand." I shouted through the door. "Understand what? That you betrayed me? That this mother sees me as trash?" Silence for a moment, then Emily answered softly, like a breeze. "It's not betrayal. I'm just taking what was always mine." My heart felt crushed in a vice. After that, I don't remember how I left the hotel. I only remember bursting outside into knife-cold night air, car horns blaring, me stumbling forward, one broken heel abandoned in the street. When I got home, the room smelled of paint, and the canvases covering my walls turned dull and meaningless. Everything I believed in love, family lay in ruins. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, watched streetlights spill through the glass, and asked myself, was I truly useless, just as my mother said? Was I born only to fall short of my sister? But in the depths of despair, a small flame began to flicker. My mother's words, Emily's contemptuous tone, Dylan's triumphant smile, all of it etched into my mind. I swore I would never let them see me collapse. I didn't know how, but I had to leave. I had to find another path, a place where no one dictated, no one took what was mine. Even then, I had no idea the journey ahead would change my life completely. I left Denver just a few days after that humiliating engagement. The night before I went, I sat in my familiar room, surrounded by paintings crowded on the walls. Each one felt like a shard of memory, no longer pride but the sting of rejection. I packed quietly just a few necessary clothes, a box of paints, some brushes, my sketchbook, and a small notebook. That notebook held lines I had written back when I still believed in Dylan's love. I meant to throw it away, then kept it, a bitter reminder. Before I walked out, I left a note on the kitchen table. Just 4 words. I am no longer your daughter. No goodbye, no explanation, no permission. I knew if I hesitated, I would never escape my family's vortex. Chicago greeted me with days of cutting rain. I rented a tiny basement room in a working-class neighborhood. The walls were damp, the ceiling so low I felt I could touch it if I raised my hand. There were no windows, only a single dim yellow bulb. But it was the only place I could afford with the small amount of money I got from selling a few old paintings to a thrift shop. Every morning, I walked the crowded streets clutching my portfolio as if it were all I had left. I signed up for a few street art pop-ups where young artists displayed their work right on the sidewalk. Few passers-by stopped, and even fewer paid. But at least there, I could still be myself. One weekend afternoon, as I arranged canvases on a rickety wooden frame, a man approached. He wore a neat gray suit, hair salt and pepper, but his face youthful and bright. His eyes lingered a long time on a landscape I'd painted back in Denver, the Rocky Mountains, under a blaze-red sunset. "How much is this one?" he asked, his voice deep and clear. I hesitated. Usually, no one asked the price. They just looked and left. I answered softly, $300. He nodded without bargaining, pulled out his wallet, and handed me a check. I glanced down at the signature. Jesse Whitman, he added. I want to hang this in our company lobby. My employees need reminding that beyond numbers and profit, there are still scenes like this in the world. I nodded slightly, doubt swirling inside. Who was this man who so easily spent that much on an unknown painting? I asked cautiously. What field are you in? He smiled. Finance. A job many find dry. But I believe art can soften that. His answer surprised me. Most finance people I'd met spoke only of profit, stocks, contracts. Few mentioned art as something essential. Jesse didn't rush off. He stayed to chat, asked where I'd studied, why I chose Chicago. I dodged family talk, saying only that I needed a fresh start. He studied me, but didn't pry. You have a distinct point of view. I can see it in your palette. If you'd like, I can introduce you to a few other, shows more serious venues than just a sidewalk like this. I flinched. Why would a successful man take an interest in me? Caution flared. I answered quickly, thank you, but I don't want to trouble you. Jesse just smiled and didn't press. Before leaving, he set down a business card. If you ever change your mind, call me. Or at least let me buy a few more pieces. The card stayed in my coat pocket for weeks. I didn't call, didn't reach out, but I took it out every night to look at it. Something about him made me want to step back and step closer at the same time. Maybe it was his calm. Maybe it was the way he didn't look at me like a failure. In the days after, I kept showing on the sidewalk. I sold a few canvases enough to cover the basement, rent, and cheap food. I cut everything to the bone, sometimes eating only one meal a day, but at least I was free. No mother hovering, no Emily's triumphant smile, no Dylan's guilty eyes. One evening, as I was packing, "Cut up," Jesse returned. He wasn't in a suit, just a rolled-sleeve shirt, far more approachable. He sat on the wooden stool beside me, bought 2 small pieces without bargaining, then asked, "Have you ever thought you deserve more than this?" I fell silent, unsure how to answer. He continued, "You have talent, and but you're hiding yourself. I don't need to know why, but I think, sooner or later you'll have to step out of this corner." His words dragged up my mother's gaze, the way she called me a weak dreamer. I clenched my fingers, keeping my voice steady. I'm fine with this life. At least it's mine. Jesse didn't argue. He only nodded, eyes full of understanding. Before he left, he set an envelope on my table. I opened it to find another check, a much larger amount. Inside was also a small note. If you want a chance to prove something, come to this address. Below, it was the address of a downtown art gallery. I sat frozen for hours, the envelope in my hand. A strange tide rose in me. I was afraid of stepping into the light, afraid someone would recognize me, afraid my family would learn I still existed. But deep down, I longed to prove my mother wrong, that I was not weak, not useless. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about Jesse's steady eyes and his question, "Have you ever thought you deserve more than this?" Maybe it was time to find the answer. It took me a full week to dial the number on Jesse's card. His voice over the phone was low, sure, yet gentle. "I knew you'd call eventually. Would you like to try your hand in a different world, Charlotte?" A different world. Those words made me hesitate. I couldn't understand why he placed his trust in me, a girl who'd fled her family, who only knew how to paint, living in a shabby basement room. I replied offhand, "I'm just an amateur painter, Mr. Whitman. I'm not suited for finance or business." Jesse smiled. "I'm not asking you to. I do what I do. I just want you to try branding design for a social investment project. We need a creative eye, not something stiff. And I think you have that." I was about to refuse, but he went on, "You don't owe me anything. I'll pay you fairly. More importantly, this is a chance for you to step off the sidewalk and see your talent recognized in a different environment." I thought for a long time that night. I didn't want to depend on anyone, especially a man in finance. But precisely because I wanted independence, I needed to earn money, needed to escape a life that barely kept me afloat. The next morning, I went to the address he gave me. The office was in a modern glass building, not flashy, but unmistakably professional. When I walked in, Jesse was standing by the window, light across his face. He turned and smiled. "Welcome to a new world, Charlotte." I started as a visual designer for a community education investment project. At first, it was just creating a logo and color palette for the communications materials. But Jesse didn't stop at assigning tasks. He often sat with me, explaining why we should choose this tone over that one, why a symbol had to express sustainability at its core. Social investing isn't just numbers, it's how you build trust. And trust, Charlotte, starts with imagery, he said. I listened and absorbed every word. In the beginning, I stumbled over the financial terminology, but instead of criticizing, Jesse patiently explained. He compared investment strategy to installation, art, and risk management to how a painter balances colors to keep a canvas harmonious. The way he used the language of art to explain finance helped me start to understand and even feel intrigued. Once, when I turned in a design that wasn't fully polished, I feared he'd be disappointed. Jesse just looked at me and asked, "Are you truly satisfied with it?" I shook my head slightly. "Then don't hand me something you're not satisfied with." Confidence isn't always being right, it's standing behind your work. Are you willing to redo it? I stayed up all night, refining every detail. The next morning, when I put the new design in front of him, I saw him nod with real satisfaction. Little by little, I adjusted to the business environment. In client meetings, I sat quietly and listened to Jesse present. He talked about investment strategy, social impact, and numbers that tell a story. I started taking notes and secretly studied basic finance online. One day, Jesse caught me with a stack of economics books on the desk. He laughed. "I've never seen anyone read finance with a face as scrunched as when a painting isn't working." I flushed. "I just want to understand more. So I'm not left behind." He stopped laughing, his gaze serious. "You're not behind at all, Charlotte. You're learning faster than many people I've known. And there's something these books can't teach. Intuition. You have good intuition. Don't lose it." His words shook me. For years, all I'd heard from my mother was that I was weak and dreamy. This was the first time someone told me I had a gift that truly mattered. As time passed, I went from the girl who sat quietly taking notes to someone who dared to offer opinions in meetings. When Jesse presented, he would sometimes turn to me. "Charlotte, what do you think?" At first I fumbled, then I focused on my own perspective, an artist's perspective. I said that visuals and storytelling are what move people, not just numbers. To my surprise, many clients agreed. After that meeting, Jesse put a hand on my shoulder. "You have a way of seeing no one else has." I began to realize I was changing. From a girl who only painted to sell for a few dollars, I had learned market thinking and how to spot opportunity in things that seemed dry. I still painted, but my strokes were different, sharper, stronger, carrying the breath of new experience. One evening, as we worked late, Jesse studied me and asked, "Charlotte, do you know why I asked you on board from the start?" I shook my head. He answered, "Because I see in your eyes the hunger to prove yourself. Skills can be learned, knowledge can be trained, but hunger, you either have it or you don't. And you have it." I fell silent, my heart pounding. In that moment, I remembered my mother's gaze and the snickers at my engagement party. And I understood that hunger wasn't just to prove something to others, but to myself that I wasn't anyone's shadow. Working with Jesse opened a new world to me. I began to see that art and business weren't as far apart as I'd thought. One nourishes emotion, the other nourishes vision, and somehow I was learning to stand between both. That was the first turning point where I began to step out of the darkness of the past and see another path for myself. I had worked with Jesse for nearly a year when everything changed. By then, I'd grown used to the demanding pace, the long meetings, the late-night design revisions. I was also used to his presence, the calm in his eyes, the way he listened as if the other person were the center of the world. To me, Jesse was simply a seasoned, successful man running social investment projects I was lucky to join. But one autumn evening, staying late at the office to finish a design, I stumbled upon something no one had mentioned. I was hunting for a folder when I found a thick envelope in a drawer. On it, the Whitman Group logo. I knew the name. Everyone did. The billion-dollar investment group renowned for sustainable finance projects across the US and Europe. Inside was a detailed financial report, and right on the first page, founder, Jesse Whitman. I was so stunned I dropped the documents. A flood of questions roared in my head. Why had Jesse never mentioned this? Why hide who he was? I returned the envelope, forcing myself to stay calm. That night, when Jesse came back from a business trip, I waited in his office. He walked in, saw me sitting quietly with the file in front of me, and his eyes dimmed for a moment. "You found out," he said softly. I looked at him, my voice trembling. "Why did you hide it from me? You're the founder of Whitman Group, one of the biggest groups in the country. And all this time, you told me you were just a regular businessman." Jesse sat across from me, fingers laced. "I keep it quiet because I don't want people who get close to me to see only money and power. I've lost many relationships because of that. With you, I didn't want to repeat the mistake." I stayed silent, turmoil rising in me. Part of me felt deceived. Another part understood. I met his eyes. "And if I hadn't found out, were you never going to tell me?" He nodded slowly. "Not until I was sure you saw me, not the fame. I was wrong to stay silent. So long." That answer softened me. Through all our work, I'd never felt Jesse boast or pressure me. On the contrary, he'd been humble, always letting me shine. Maybe because he didn't say it, I could see him more clearly. A few days later, Jesse invited me on a short business trip to Boston to meet partners. It was a late flight. We sat side by side, warm golden light filling the cabin. I asked, "Do you ever feel tired of living two lives, being an ordinary Jesse and being Jesse Whitman, founder of a billion-dollar group?" He smiled, eyes far away. "Tired, yes. But I realized not everyone needs to know everything about me. I just want one person who trusts and understands enough. And I hope that person is you." I turned to him, my heart racing. It was the first time he'd revealed himself so personally. At the end of the trip, walking along the Boston shoreline, Jesse stopped and faced me. The wind tossed my hair. He gently tucked it back, his voice warm and low. "Charlotte, I've waited for this moment. I don't want to hide anymore. I want you to know I care about you, not just as a colleague." I went still. A rush of feelings, wariness, doubt, and a spreading warmth. After the wounds from Dylan and my family, I never imagined a man would look at me with such trust. I whispered, "Why me, Jesse? I have nothing compared to the women you could choose." He smiled and shook his head. "You have what they don't: authenticity. You don't try to make me admire you. You just live true to yourself. That's what I can't look away from." I didn't answer. But inside me, the walls I'd built for years began to crack. From that trip on, our relationship shifted. Jesse no longer kept a cool distance. He started noticing small details in my life, asking if I'd eaten dinner, reminding me to dress warm, praising a painting I'd just finished. Those little things, so ordinary, were exactly what I'd longed for: to be seen, to be valued. Once, working late together, Jesse looked over, his voice rough. "Charlotte, I know you're still afraid of being hurt, but I promise if you give me a chance, I will never leave you standing alone before a crowd like before." My chest tightened at that. The Denver engagement flashed back the snickers, the scornful looks, my mother's icy voice. I looked at Jesse and found certainty in his eyes, nothing like Dylan's wavering years ago. I whispered, "I need time." He nodded. "I can wait." In truth, I didn't make him wait long. Just a few months later, after we finished a major scholarship project for underprivileged kids, I knew I couldn't keep refusing the feelings growing in me. After the launch event, when everyone had left the hall, I walked to him, gently took his hand, and murmured, "Jesse, I want to try." He looked at me, surprise and joy mingling in his eyes. Without another word, he pulled me into his arms. Warmth spread through me, washing away old wounds. From that day, we were officially a couple. Our bond wasn't just work, it was life. We worked together by day, then shared dinners and dreams at night. He told me about betrayals by partners. I told him about a childhood in Emily's shadow. We listened, understood, and slowly, I felt safe. I knew what it meant to be loved without comparison, without having to prove myself. Jesse didn't see me as fragile. He saw me as an equal, an essential part of his world. And that was something I'd never had with anyone else. There were moments I still wondered if someday I might lose everything again, as I had lost Dylan. But whenever I looked at Jesse, I knew that at least I wasn't walking alone anymore. News that Whitman Group was preparing to acquire a chain of law and finance firms on the East Coast spread internally just a few days after Jesse signed the preliminary agreement. When I read the list of names in the file, my heart clenched. One bold line stood out: Hayes and Carter, LLP. I sat frozen for a long time, my eyes fixed on that name. Old memories crashed over me like waves. Emily, my sister, and Dylan, the man who once promised to walk beside me for life. Now their names stood on a law firm that Whitman Group was about to fold in. Jesse walked into the room, shrugging off his coat, and asked, "You've looked over the list, right? Any firm catch your interest?" I slowly set the file down and tried to keep my voice even. "Yes, a firm called Hayes and Carter. Do you know anything about them?" He frowned. "I only know they're mid-sized but in financial trouble. Why do you ask?" I gave a small, strangely calm smile. "Because it's my sister's firm and the man who left me." Silence filled the room. Jesse set his coat on a chair, came to sit beside me, and laid his hand over mine. "Charlotte, I didn't know. If this makes you uncomfortable, we can reconsider the deal." I shook my head and met his eyes. "No, the opposite. This is an opportunity. I want to personally run the announcement event. I want to do it in front of everyone." Jesse was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "If that's what you want, I'll support you. But are you sure, Charlotte? Facing the past isn't easy." I gripped his hand, my voice low but firm. All my life I was belittled and pushed to the margins. I want to step out and tell them, I am no longer the one left behind. From that day, I began planning the event. I asked Jesse for full control of the logistics. We chose a luxury hotel in the heart of New York, the kind of place major corporations use for conferences. I coordinated with the event design team and chose a palette of deep green and gilded gold symbolizing both sustainability and power. Every night I sat with the plan, adjusting tiny details, table layouts, stage lighting, even which wine to serve. I wanted everything perfect, not only for Whitman Group but to prove to myself I had moved far beyond the day I stood alone at that humiliating engagement. More than once, Jesse stepped in and found me still at the computer near midnight. He set a hand on my shoulder and murmured, "You don't have to strain yourself this hard. I believe in you, but don't let the past become a burden." I looked up at him, steady. "This isn't a burden. This is the chance I've waited for. I need to do it." Sending the invitations was the moment my hands shook the most. I personally drafted the letter to Hayes and Carter, attaching a formal invite with the Whitman Group logo. My pen paused when I wrote the recipients, Emily Hayes and Dylan Carter. My hand went cold, but I still signed. Charlotte Whitman, Director of Communications, Whitman Group. When I hit send, I knew there was no turning back. The following weeks were a whirlwind. I met with the communications team, PR, and the leadership group. I spelled out the event's importance. This isn't just an announcement. It's a milestone proving Whitman Group's continual expansion, aligning sustainable values with new sectors. We must leave a strong impression on guests and the press. Everyone nodded and trusted me. But only I knew the deeper reason beating in my chest. I wanted Emily and Dylan to see me standing here, not a girl fleeing in tears, but a woman capable of leading a high-stakes event. At the dress rehearsal, Jesse pulled me out to the balcony where the city lights stretched for miles. He studied me for a long moment and said, "I thought I understood you, Charlotte." But each day I see you're far stronger than you think. I'm proud of you. I smiled, eyes stinging. You know, Jesse, after being abandoned in Denver, I believed I'd never raise my head again. But now, because of you and this work, I'm not only standing, I can go farther. He drew me into an embrace and whispered, "And this time, you won't go alone." Those words cooled the tension inside me like water. At the same time, they steeled my resolve. I wasn't doing this just for myself, but for every year I'd been dismissed. As the event neared, I received Hayes and Carter's RSVP. Emily would attend with Dylan. My heart pounded reading that line. I saw my sister's proud face and Dylan's cold eyes from that day. But I wasn't afraid. I whispered to myself, "Let them see who I've become." And so I stepped into the final days of prep, convinced that evening would be when I reclaimed my rightful place. No shouting, no revenge, just standing firm in the light. On the night of the New York event, the hotel blazed with lights. The hallway was lined with a red carpet and flanked by artworks I'd chosen to reinforce our sustainability message. Reporters, investors, and media were all in place. Stepping out of the car with Jesse, I drew a deep breath. I wore a deep emerald gown with a pearl at the collar. Every seam and accessory wasn't just for beauty, but to say, I am not the woman shoved out of her own engagement anymore. Jesse took my hand as we entered the main hall. Camera shutters clicked, greetings rippled around us. I smiled, shook hands, and felt the curious eyes of more than a few people. Among hundreds of guests, I quickly spotted 3 familiar faces. Emily in a vivid red dress, all confidence and pride. Dylan beside her in a crisp suit, but restless eyes. And my mother Margaret, elegant as ever, but breathing a little too fast, as if holding something back. The moment their eyes met mine, all 3 froze. Emily's eyes widened, her lips parting in disbelief. Dylan looked me up and down, stunned and uneasy. Margaret's social smile snapped into place, but I still caught the deep confusion in her gaze. A few guests approached to chat, and we found ourselves in the same circle. Jesse made the introduction. "This is Charlotte Whitman, Executive Vice President for Strategy at Whitman Group and my wife." I inclined my head with a calm smile. Emily edged half a step back. Dylan clenched the handle of his wineglass. Margaret spoke first, her voice strained. "Charlotte, what a surprise to see you here." I met her eyes and answered evenly. "Yes, quite a surprise, Mother." The air tightened. Emily scraped together her composure and interjected, Vice President Whitman, I didn't expect you to be in this industry. I thought you were still somewhere painting." I smiled lightly. "Art is still part of me, but maybe it's what helped me understand how to tell a major corporation's story. And tonight, I'm here to tell Whitman Group's." Emily's face dimmed. Dylan stayed quiet, sipping his wine, but I felt his eyes flick toward me, as if he wanted to speak but held back. Margaret rushed in, trying for a gentle tone. "I'm glad you've succeeded. You know our family always hoped you'd find your place." I looked straight at her, chandelier light cutting a moment sharp. "You once said, my sister was the one worthy of a successful man, that I was just a dreamer. What do you think now?" She faltered, her glass trembling. Emily jumped in, trying to save the scene. "Please, sis, we're all adults now. No need to dig up the past." Jesse rested a hand on my back, a reminder I wasn't alone. He turned politely to another cluster of guests. "Excuse us, we still have many to greet. Please, enjoy the evening." We stepped away, leaving Emily and Dylan rooted in place, faces still stunned. My stride felt steadier than ever. All evening, I led the comms team, fielded press questions, and introduced guests to Jesse. Each time I passed Emily and Dylan, I felt their eyes trailing me, irritated, uneasy. Margaret tried to chat up power players, but now and then she looked at me with a mix of regret and calculation. When it was time for the formal announcement, I took the stage. Hundreds of eyes fixed on me. I spoke clearly into the mic. "Whitman Group is pleased to announce its expansion into legal and financial services with the acquisition of multiple firms on the East Coast. Our goal is to build sustainable value, aligning profit with social responsibility. As the applause paused, my gaze landed precisely on Emily and Dylan. I saw their faces tighten as I continued. Among them is Hayes and Carter. We believe that, with this partnership, all parties will grow together and build the future together. Thunderous applause filled the room. Emily gripped her chair. Dylan avoided my eyes. Margaret covered her mouth with her glass but couldn't hide her pallor. After the speech, I stepped down to solemn music. Jessie took my hand and whispered, "You did beautifully. They've seen it all." I nodded, relief threading through me. No shouting, no revenge, just standing strong in the light. And the past had to bow. As the program reached its peak, Jessie stepped to the lectern. Stage lights caught the silver in, his hair, and his face radiated calm authority. The room fell silent, expectant. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice resonant. "Today marks a special milestone in Whitman Group's growth. We officially announced the acquisition of a chain of law and finance firms on the East Coast, with a total value of more than $800 million. This isn't just a number, it's our commitment to the sustainable future of finance and law." Applause thundered, but Jessie raised a hand for a moment more. He continued, "Among those firms, Hayes and Carter is an important piece. I believe this partnership will bring long-term benefits not only to both sides but to the community. But note, it's only a small part of the larger picture. Whitman Group is opening a new path much broader." I looked toward the row where Emily and Dylan sat. Their faces went rigid. Clearly they hadn't expected their firm to be just one sliver of a massive deal. Emily, used to being the center, clutched the armrest, lips pressed thin. Dylan stared into his wineglass, avoiding every eye. Jessie paused, his gaze turning to me. He smiled, and his next words squeezed my heart. "And allow me to say this, today's success isn't mine alone. Behind every strategy and step stands someone who has walked with me not only as a colleague, but as my partner in life. Charlotte Whitman." The entire room turned to me. I froze for a heartbeat, then kept my smile. Jessie stepped down a few stairs and reached for me. I rose, my hand trembling in his, and he led me onto the stage. "Charlotte doesn't walk behind me," he said, enunciating each word. "She walks beside me. Every strategy, every success at Whitman Group bears her mark. Without Charlotte, there would be no today." Applause exploded, echoing through the hall. I heard cheers, saw cameras flashing, but in that moment, all I saw was Emily bowing her head, eyes shiny though she tried to hide it. Dylan sat, motionless, his face laid bare with disappointment and regret. Margaret could no longer maintain composure. She turned away to avoid my gaze. I said nothing, only held Jessie's hand tight. My heart burned not with triumph but with the public acknowledgement he gave me. Those words were what I had once waited to hear from another man, but never did. Now they came from Jessie, the one who chose me, not because anyone told him to, but because he knew I was worthy. After the speech, we returned to our table. Many guests came to offer congratulations, shaking my hand and praising, "It's wonderful to see a woman recognized so deservedly." I smiled and thanked them, but my eyes kept drifting back to those three. Not long after, Emily stood and came toward me. The pride my sister always wore had shattered, replaced by a look mixed with helplessness. "Sis," her voice was hoarse, "I didn't expect you to be in this position." I smiled gently but firmly. "Emily, I'm not here to surprise you. I'm just walking my own path. The very path you and Mom once said I wasn't strong enough to take." Emily didn't answer. She turned away, her shoulders trembling. I knew it was disappointment not only in me, but in herself, realizing all her old schemes had turned meaningless. Dylan also approached, trying to keep his voice steady. "Charlotte, I didn't think it would turn out like this. I looked him straight in the eyes. "You don't need to explain. The past has already said everything." Dylan went quiet. His eyes flickered, then dropped, avoiding my gaze. Margaret came last. She still held herself with elegance, but her eyes betrayed the turmoil. She said softly, "Charlotte, I can't deny what you've achieved. I just..." I cut in, my tone calm. "You don't need to say anything. You once said I was just a dreamer. But it's precisely those dreams that brought me here. And I don't need your approval to know my worth." She fell silent, her lips trembling. I saw my mother no longer in control. That night, music, laughter, and applause blended together. But for me, what mattered most wasn't the event's glittering success, it was the moment Jesse publicly told the world I was his partner. Not walking behind, not hidden, but beside him, seen and respected. In the hall's shimmering light, I felt it clearly. The honor I once lost had been restored, not through loud revenge, but through a quiet, decisive affirmation. And that was what made the other side bow their heads. When the party was winding down and guests were drifting out, I stepped into the corridor outside the hall to take a deep breath. Gentle jazz still played, warm light stretching along the walkway. I thought I'd have a quiet moment, but no. Margaret stood there, her figure tilted under the light, a half-finished glass of wine in hand. She turned when she heard the soft tap of my heels. Her makeup was still immaculate, but her eyes, tired and calculating, couldn't hide the truth. "Charlotte," she said, trying for gentleness, "we need to talk." I stood straight, keeping just enough distance, my eyes fixed on her. "What do you want to say?" She stepped closer, softening her tone. "Everything I did was for you. You may think I favored Emily, but I only wanted our family to have a firm place. You're sensitive. I was afraid you couldn't bear the pressure, so I chose a different way. I never hated you." I looked her in the eye, my voice even, each word like a blade. "You once thought I was a burden. You said it plenty in words and in looks. What you did for Emily was step on me. But because of that, I learned to find my true worth not in this family, but somewhere else, where I don't need anyone's permission to stand tall." Margaret trembled slightly, lips pressed tight. Clearly, she hadn't expected such a firm reply. She rushed to change tack. "Charlotte, your sister is in real trouble. After this deal, their firm is at a disadvantage. Your sister, she's still your sister. I want to ask you to arrange a position for Emily in the group. Something suitable, so she's not left behind." I was silent for a moment, hearing my heartbeat slow and steady. Then I answered, my voice not raised but icy. "Success isn't a gift to be handed out. It has to be earned. If Emily truly has ability, she'll find her way. If she's only waiting to be lifted by others, then any position is meaningless." Margaret frowned, more urgent now. "Are you really going to turn your back on your own sister? She's your blood." I held her gaze without blinking. "You turned your back on me first. You chose Emily. You handed Dylan to her. You taught her that she was worthy and I was not. So don't ask me to make up for the consequences you created." The air thickened as if the corridor had frozen. Margaret gripped her glass, her hand shaking so a few drops spilled to the floor. She tried to steady her voice. "I just don't want our family to fall apart." I lifted one corner of my mouth, not bitter, but a cold understanding. "The family fell apart long ago, Mom. When you told Dylan that Emily deserved him more, when Emily let it happen, when I was pushed out of my own engagement, it fell apart that day. I've simply kept living." Margaret stood still, eyes lowered. I looked at her and realized that my mother wasn't the powerful, razor-sharp woman I feared. She was just a mother facing a stark truth. The child she had most underestimated now stood steadier than anyone else in the family. She whispered, almost inaudibly, "Charlotte, I was wrong." I didn't answer. I simply turned and walked away, leaving her with a glass gone lukewarm. And with every step, I knew the balance between my mother and me had shifted. When we returned home, our penthouse in the heart of New York was bathed in the soft glow of streetlights through the wide glass. I sank onto the sofa and kicked off the heels that had tortured my feet all night. Jesse poured 2 glasses of wine and set one before me. He sat beside me, his hand brushing mine, a wordless check-in. "Did you get what you wanted, Charlotte?" Jesse's warm voice came, his eyes studying my face. I took a sip, letting the red swirl down my throat. Then I smiled, not a victor's smile, but a peaceful one. No, Jesse. I don't need their recognition anymore. I only need to stop feeling resentful. And tonight, I let it go. He was quiet for a moment, then nodded. I'm proud of you. Not because you stood firm before them, but because you chose to stand firm for yourself. I leaned on his shoulder, warmth spreading through me. For years, I carried anger, pain, and a relentless ache. Tonight, beneath music and glittering lights, I realized I didn't need revenge to find justice. Growth and success were the clearest answers. After Jesse went to bed, I didn't go to the bedroom. I walked to the small room at the end of the hall, the studio he'd given me when we moved here. Soft, yellow light fell across the easel. My paintings lined the walls, each one a stage of my journey. A young girl with dreamy strokes, a woman in despair, and the stronger Charlotte of now. I placed a blank canvas on the easel. Sitting down, I gazed at the white space for a long time. Images rose in my mind. A rainy night in Chicago, the damp basement room, Jesse's face when he first bought my painting, Emily's bowed head in the hall tonight, and my mother's eyes confused, hollow. Those pieces wove together into a path I never thought I'd travel. I picked up a brush, dipped it in blue, and swept the first stroke across the white. The color spread smooth, like a new breath. I added yellow, the light of belief. Then I let the brush glide freely, no sketch, no forcing. The painting took shape, not a scene of pain nor of portrait, but a wide horizon, a rising dawn. I whispered, as if to myself, not to run to shine. A soft knock. Jesse stood there in a robe, eyes gentle. I guessed I'd find you here. I turned and smiled. I just wanted to paint a little. After everything, this is still how I breathe. He came close, studied the unfinished canvas, and nodded. It's beautiful. It looks like you. No more darkness, only light. I set the brush down and looked up at him. You know, I used to think I had to prove to them that I was worthy. Now I realize I don't have to prove anything. I just have to live fully as myself. He took my hand and squeezed it. And that is the real victory. I nodded, feeling a vast space open inside me. No more resentment, no more bitterness. I turned back to the blank canvas and kept painting. Each stroke was part of the journey back to myself. Outside, New York didn't sleep. The lights still blazed. In this small room, I sat before a new canvas, knowing I was beginning another chapter not defined by betrayal, not bound by family expectations. I painted, not to cover wounds, but to let my own light spread. And that was freedom. Every life story leaves its own mark. Mine is a journey from being cast aside by blood to finding my value in light. But what about you? In my place, would you choose revenge or let go to walk forward free? Share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes our answers become someone else's inspiration. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to follow the channel to hear more stories about love, family, and life lessons. They might make you ponder, might move you, and who knows, might give you new faith for the road ahead.